Next thing we're going to do is we're going to write just a little check here, our else statement, for when this program does not read a valid value here. And this is going to be a console.writeLine, and we're just going to say something simple here, like you did not enter the number between 0 and 10. And so now in this case, say that the person enters a 23. What's going to happen is the 23 gets read into the program, sets the in value equal to 23. It's going to parse that over to an integer still. So we now have an integer that's equal to 23. It's going to ask itself, okay, is this value between 0 and 10? And it's not in this case, so it'll give us this output here. Now, as of right now, there's one small little problem with this program here, or with this section of code. And that has to do with the -99 here. So what's going to happen is when the user enters -99, is it will go through and it'll read it into the read line, set it equal to our in value, parse that over to an integer, so we now have an integer of -99. It'll ask itself, okay, is the value between 0 and 10? And it's not. So it'll give us this else statement here, our little error statement that we wrote in. We don't want to see that every single time the user enters -99 because they did enter a valid number. It's just not one that we want to be read in. So we're going to create another little if statement here. And we're going to nest this here. So we're going to say if in value, once again, does not equal -99, then we're going to run this. Oops, forgot a quote there. Let me try that again. There we go. And it made it nice and nested there. So you can easily see that this block of code is underneath this if statement here. So now, instead of when the user enters -99, we don't have to worry about seeing this console.writeLine. And so that is the bulk of our little tally system here. We have all the, it's going to just keep on running this while statement. So it's going to keep on running until the user finishes. So I always like to throw in some little notes there on the end. Makes it really easy to see where blocks of code end and begin. When you get a lot of these curly brackets going, sometimes it gets confusing of what's what and what belongs where. So sometimes it's a nice little thing to throw in those little comments there. And so we're going to move on to our next bit of code here. And we're actually going to create a new integer. And this integer, we're going to title it number of entered values. And we're going to set that equal to 0 to start out with. So with this number of entered values, our ultimate goal here with this next section of code is we're going to try and count the number of different values, or not the number of different values, but the total number of values that the user entered. And to do that, we're going to use a for each statement. So we have for each integer I. So we're actually creating a new variable here. This is integer. We're going to create an integer variable, call it I, and for each integer I, in counter. And so you'll notice here that the integer and in are both highlighted in blue. That's actually part of the syntax for the for each statement. You got to make sure that you do have that in there. And what's really for this for each statement, the I, that's just a variable that we created. And once again, referencing this counter back to our original array. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take that number of entered values. We're going to say plus equal to I. What this means is that for each value within I, So for each index, each value within the index of counters, it's going to take that value and it's going to add that to the pre-existing value for number of entered values. So what's going to happen is after we've already entered all of our values, we've incremented the different values for what we've entered, and say the user entered the number 0 3 different times. The index for 0 in counters is going to be equal to 3. So what's going to happen, it's going to start out, it's equal to 0, and it's going to add 0 plus 3, since 3 is the number of times we entered 0. And so it'll add 0 plus 3, and it'll set that equal to the number of entered values. Another way that you could write this, it's a little bit easier to understand, but this is an easier way to write it, or to code it. Easier way to understand it is number of entered values equals number of entered values plus I. And so after we have 0 plus 3, number of entered values is going to become 3, and it'll go back and it'll just loop this statement until it gets through each index in all of counter. So it's going to move on to 1 and say that the user entered the number 1 twice. So it's going to take the 3 that it's set at currently for number of entered values, and it'll take 3 plus 2, and it'll set number of entered values to 5, and just keep going through until it gets all the way through to 10. And so that, we're going to use that then for our first set of output. So we're going to do a console.writeLine. We're actually just going to do a blank line there, give a little space between our values that we entered in this. And we'll do another console.writeLine. This time though, I'm going to say number of entered values and so I have number of entered values. It's a little tab command there, gives a little space in between on that line, and we have 0. So our number that's going to be representative there. We're going to end our string, close the quotes, add in a comma so we can give her, tells the program when we're going to start listing all these variables here. So our variable 0, this one is going to be actually just number of entered values. And so what's going to happen is it'll take this number of entered values, tab it over, and then it'll take where that 0 is, it's going to take the number that's currently set for number of entered values, and it's going to display it where that 0 is. So there's our first part of our output.